And as mentioned, application governance is our first feature we want to see the improvements for. And you see that automated system entitlement assignment on the right-hand side. You see, of course, here the new standard web portal. And there you can see a lot of things more described like the following. There is a new functionality available that allows to try on a match criteria to automatically assign entitlements to business applications. There might be rules available which allow that, especially namings of objects, for example. And these rules exist and can be used as optional rules, of course, and help administrators so that at business applications, not everything needs to be configured manually. If such rules are in place, it is always a good idea to notify the admins about changes. Yeah, for example, there is now a new object that gets assigned. Then people can get notified. Therefore, exists a configuration parameter underneath of QER IT shop, mail template items, and there is an improve about application entitlements. If that is set, then admins will be notified about automatically assigned objects. At the end, such entitlements will then get flagged, and that is what will be done in the column called AOB entitlement is dynamic. Is dynamic means automatically assigned. The next one here is that there's a date of next attestations possible to be set on business applications. Of course, if that according to that specific feature, there are then attestation policies created which are using that specific set date, and you can see them here in the list. There is an employee attestation on application date, and the same happens then for entitlement attestation, for entitlement membership attestation, role membership attestation, and account attestation. And we continue directly with the synchronization framework. One of the problems in the identity manager is always to handle systems which are currently or temporarily offline. And this handling for temporary offline target systems was improved. First of all, there's now an offline mode available, and that can be used for these specific target systems. And instead of the typical frozen jobs, you then typically see if such a system is temporarily unavailable, there is then a status suspend, which means the system is not there, and reactivate when the job gets back online. For some schema changes was necessary, there is a new property on QBM server, which is job service suspend and suspend reason. And then you will see there the new properties on DPR root object connection info, which is offline and is offline mode available. One, of course, says the system is active or not, and the second says it is a system where offline is possible. For all the non-offline systems, you will then get the typical frozen error message. Continuing that, you can see then the offline mode and you can change the offline mode configuration directly from the Launchpad. And as you easily can see on the screenshot on the right lower side, there is then the flag target system as offline, and that allows you then to configure these systems. And of course, in job queue info, in the list where you can see all the queues, you will then see as well another flag that says this is one of these specific temporary offline systems or not. And the last part of this specific behavior here is then something that has to do with all the dirty details if such a system works. If you deal with these temporary offline systems, then this specific job server, which is part of the story, should not be used with other queues for other systems. So it should be an exclusive job server for that temporary available system. That means there should no other functionalities for that specific job server, even if there are running scripts or whatever else is configured for that. And that means you have to create one dedicated job service just and only for that specific queue, which targets that temporary offline target system. We do have managed levels, of course, which just configure the amount of automation in the identity manager regarding accounts and inheritances of properties from identities to the accounts. And we are running more and more and all the time I like to say, in more trouble. So we implemented in the past a specific way where just accounts and identities could be disconnected by not using at the end managed level to automate things, and then the managed level itself, which was allowing just to manage specific properties for specific account types. And in the meantime, we start now as well to implement exceptions for all of these rules for specific objects. This is now the approach here, as you can see it easily. For a specific managed level, you can define an override. This override allows you then to have a rule, and that rule can then be broken for specific use cases. An example is there as well, left lower. You see that, for example, specify a group should never be removed from user accounts. That means typically if you deactivate something, a lot of groups will get removed. And here you can then define, for example, an exception. Therefore, new table was created. You see it there, TSB specific group behavior. And then you see some properties as well. A little bit an improvement in the report for our synchronization logs. As you can see it on the right hand side, object display. There is now an object name displayed for provisioned operations in the header of the synchronization log. As we all know, if we start to update synchronization projects, then typically running operations will be just stopped. And now it's possible, with the help of the parameter common job service redo delay minutes, to configure how long that stop will take before the process gets continued. Of course, then based on the new updated synchronization project. In the synchronization editor, we do have some windows where we can enter code to. These windows was just allowing to enter typically VB.NET code. Now, all of these code windows, here you can see it on the example on the right-hand side, allow as well the same what in Designer is quite a usual thing, and that means you can add code snippets just for the 3 different use cases on the left side, and that makes that life much easier than before. Let's talk about attestation enhancements. And the first attestation enhancement is a big one, and there's a little bit of story to tell around to get that better understood. You remember in the Identity Manager, we have 2 ways of attestation. We can do an attestation or a certification just for single situations, single permission assignments, for example. And we are able to do the same for a set of assignments or a set of permissions, which is the report attestation. The difference is that on a single attestation, a single permission or a single assignment or something like that could be taken and be certified. And if something is not okay, it could lead to an automatically deprovisioning process, for example. In difference to that, the set of permissions, assignments, or something else, which is the report attestation. In the report attestation, it is possible just to build a report that contains all the data situation we are talking to. For example, the data situation of a complete individual, that means of an identity. And then managers have to look into that report and identify things they don't want or things they are okay with. In any case, such a report attestation can't lead to any type of automatically deprovisioning because the data is in a report. The approval or denial, it's in the head of some managers. And this is the problem. That means the data is more or less encapsulated in that specific report. Course of that, customers was moving more and more to single attestations and run into another problem because they have to create an attestation policy for each single assignment, each single permission situation they want to be certified. And that was then at the end a bunch of 10, 20, 30 different attestation policies, and all of them should be stored together because they are more or less part of one attestation run. This is now supported from a system perspective. Therefore, iOneIdentity just created something which is called a policy collection. A policy collection is something like a group where you can assign policies to. It's not really a group, it is just a collection. It's a set of policies. And in difference to the single different policies you have to run for an attestation run, it is now possible to run the complete policy collection. That means all of these different policies gets started at once. It is like a report attestation, but with the good thing that all the single situations now needs to be cited separately, and because they are to be citable in the system, it is then easy to automate, for example, the deprovisioning later on or something like that. And to end the complete story exists, of course, a report that can be run after the complete attestation of that policy collection that documents what happened. As you easily can see, the interestingly part of that is that it is with the policy collection now possible to attest the complete permission situation of one identity as mentioned. Yeah, we did that with a report in the past. Now this is possible as well. But what is now possible with the policy collection, you can complete attest the situation of one individual. And the right hand side shows you now what could there be included. For example, yes, of course, you can attest the identity itself. Primary and secondary department memberships could be attested. Memberships of system roles and business roles, of course. You can attest linked user accounts and assigned system entitlements, of course. And that all should solve that very specific problem. It is extremely of interest, especially if you combine that with something which is not part of that slide here, and that is the sample data set we inserted in the Identity Manager shortly before. The sample data set means it is possible with the help of calculations, for example, if people in an organization move from one department to another or one cost center to another, or people where some data gets changed, to move these people into a sample data set. And that sample data set is then the sample data set that at the end, for example, a policy collection will attest on the next attestation run. Together with the policy collection, this is a really cool thing to improve these attestations. From a technical perspective, it is necessary, of course, to have the policy collection. There it is. You have default attestation policies you can assign, a lot new assignments, of course. And we have a new approval procedure called XM, which is the manager of employees for all attestations. That could then be used for the objects as you can see it on the right hand side, yeah, person and so on. Person has ESET, which is system entitlements, assignment, and. To extend attestation, another big feature was implemented, and that is what you can see there, which is support to implement staging and challenge phases. What's behind that? The main problem is that more and more people want to, let me say it that way, interrupt attestation cases or interrupt automatically deprovisioning and want to decide. That's an interesting thing. The same people which just say a report is not good enough for me, I want to have automatically deprovisioning, are just looking for ways where they can interact with the attestation. That means the system determines a lot of data or a lot of people and permissions should be removed. And now the people say, no, I don't want to have the automatically deprovisioning. What I'm interested in is that I get a list of things where I can decide additionally to that. And this is what was implemented in the Identity Manager. It is now possible to improve the attestation procedures. That means the approval procedures there in the way that you can assign new decision makers. Yeah, for example, there is an approval step, challenge the decision, which means another person is now able to say, yes, that automatically deprovisioning process for that specific assignment, that is what I want. Yes, I approve. And with that, that approval will go further. And another one was as well created, another approval procedure. You can see that there, which is the owner of the attestation policy. That both it's possible, you can have staging phases and challenge phases during the attestation. A little bit more technical is what you can see there, attestation minor changes. And that targets a very specific feature in the Identity Manager. You know, there is the attestation and maybe there is a conflict that is identified. And now the person doing the approval or the people who have to solve that problem needs to investigate a little bit further in the system to figure out what exactly will be, on the one hand side, the situation, and on the other hand, the result. Therefore, exists a specific tab where people can look into the attestation case and get more and more information. This information needs to be collected, and that collection could, if we attest a huge group of people, slow down the system or take a little bit longer once it is collected, so that it is fully detailed displayable. And in big organization, that leads then to the one or the other delay. And because of that, it is now possible to configure the depth of this information. You see now the attestation object, descriptive property only. You see related object 1 to 3 only, and descriptive properties only, which is the hardest. And with that, you can, for a specific attestation procedure, decide how deep this information investigation will be. That means at the end, you can control how complicated the calculation process for such is. Again, a lot of people will just ignore that and will take the complete depth, especially in smaller organizations or medium organizations. Only in huge enterprises, it might make sense just to limit here a little bit. And a small approval on attestation policies. That means approval policies here. As you know, we have many of these, and it could be a challenge if you like, for example, creating an attestation policy to find the right approval policy to add them. Because of that, it is now possible just to take these policies and hide them so that they can be used from the system, but the user in the front end is not able to see them anymore. This creates a clean selection, but be aware of, if you need them, you have to activate them first to get them as well selectable. There is now a new flag inserted, is hidden from selection. You see that it is on policy decision method. That means on the approval policy. And the effect of that flag is, if it is set, that people can't find them in the front ends anymore to use them, but they can be used. That means it is not a really deactivation where the policy completely disappears. It is now just hidden so that it can't be used creating a policy, but it could be used from automated processes. The next improvement on attestation is to talk a little bit about the reasons. This is a feature you know from the IT shop and from request and approval. In the IT shop, it is configurable if you decide something as a decision maker that you need to answer reasons or not. Approval reasons, denial reasons, all of that could be configured as mandatory. For attestation, that was not possible right now, and with that new improvement here, it is now possible to do exactly that. You see there is a new flag for approval reason types and denial reason types, and these types can then be at the end configured. And now let's talk about the IT shop enhancements. A big new feature in the IT shop is, of course, what we see here, which is recommendations for request approvers. What exactly is behind that? One of the most big problems for approvers is, if they are, for example, new in the job, or they had long vacations or something like that they sometimes don't know what they should decide. And because of that, it is now possible just to give these people some hints or recommendations. And that is what you can see there. If the decision makers are not really sure what they should do, they can use the system for some help and get recommendations for their decisions just based on specific criteria. You can see these recommendation types on the left-hand side, and you can see on the right-hand side the specific form that is shown in the standard web portal if decision makers needs help. If we look at these recommendation types, then you can see there is the standard peer group analysis. That means the recommendation is to do or to do not something depending on the rest of the team. That means if I need decisions for a specific team member and all the other team members does have the same permissions, then the recommendation is, yes, do it, for example. There is cross-functional, which means that the product is from another department as the requester. There are rule violations as you see it. If there are rule violations ahead with that specific permission gets granted or something like that, then you will get informed about as well. If the risk index gets changed, there will be a recommendation about that. There is the approval rate. That means if a lot of approvals exists for an assignment or for an approval like that, then you will get informed as well. And my absolutely favorite is here the excessive entitlement thing. That is just to identify entitlement collectors. So if a person collects a lot of entitlements, then this thing will say, hey, that guy is an entitlement collector. Maybe it's not a good idea to assign something additional. If we look into the algorithms, I want to make it short. Of course, if all the conditions are good, then there is an approval. And then two ways to proceed for problems. First, for the first three of these recommendations, if one of them is broken, then automatically a rejection will happen. And additionally to that, if one of the other three is broken, there must be two broken together so that the rejection could happen. As you can see, there is a wait for 1 for option 1 and a wait for 0.5 for option 2 item. And of course, no recommendation is possible at all, because sometimes the system don't know as well what to do. From a technical implementation perspective, you see there is a slide that shows you all the configuration parameters and workflows and scripts and processes and properties which was inserted just to make it happen. Another idea is the request with dynamic parameters, and here I want to step a little bit faster about it. It was implemented for one super big enterprise customer we had, but the idea is the following. That specific thing here was just built for groups, and the idea was just to say there are new people, for example, just getting permissions. And they do that not because they know exactly which permissions they need. Maybe these permissions did not exist right now for this specific people. They get their assignment based on some parameters, like a matrix. That means this person is working in this specific department, there in this specific organization, and in this specific workplace. And inserting all of these parameters, the system identifies the necessary permissions based on, of course, the abbreviations of my matrix, and assigns these specific groups to that specific identity, for example. If one of the groups did not exist because one of the matrix parameters was used first time, then these groups will automatically create it. You see, the whole thing works with unified namespace groups B. This is a very nice and very specific feature. Something like that exists. That means you can specify a matrix for specific people, and depending on that matrix, then your entitlement set gets assigned or created. Technically, is that pretty complex? You see a lot of parameters necessary. I don't want to go into details there. And you see the dynamic parameter setup set looks like the following. This is the complete description if you want to do something like that. And that's it then from the dynamic parameter set. Again, I don't want to go too much into detail. Reason for that is, of course, it is just implemented for one super key player. If other people are interested, please have a look into the manual. Minor enhancements for the IT shop. First of all, service items can be hidden from the service catalog. This means you can set a specific flag is to hide from IT shop, and with that, this item can't be found in the service catalog anymore. Nevertheless, it is possible, for example, automated to assign it or to request for it. But it is not possible to see it in the catalog. This is to simplify the catalog, which is sometimes helpful in specific situations where you don't want that people can find a specific item, but you want that it is possible to get that item on a special case.